Before modern legal systems, the ancient Germanic and Celtic cultures relied on a unique practice to resolve disputes: trial by combat. In these societies, trial by combat was seen as a way for gods or higher powers to intervene directly in human affairs, proving one's innocence through physical prowess and divine favor. The origins of this practice can be traced back to the belief that victory in combat was a sign of divine intervention. If a suspected criminal survived an ordeal, it was seen as evidence of their innocence. In ancient Germanic and Celtic cultures, trial by combat was deeply rooted in the idea that one's physical strength and resilience could serve as proof of their moral purity. This belief system overlapped with religious practices, where trials were seen not just as legal proceedings, but also as rituals of purification and divine judgment. As centuries passed, this method of dispute resolution was integrated into medieval European legal systems, reflecting the intertwined nature of law, honor, and religion during that era. The practice eventually evolved to include various forms of ordeals, including combat with weapons, enduring extreme temperatures, and holding heated objects. Each type of ordeal was believed to reveal the truth through divine intervention, solidifying its place in medieval justice systems. As we delve deeper into the history of trial by combat, we'll see how this ancient practice shaped and influenced legal systems over time. The Romans employed a system known as duelum, where two parties would engage in combat to determine the truth of a matter. This practice was not merely a form of entertainment or sport, but was deeply ingrained in their legal system. In this ancient system, just like medieval trial by combat, there was a belief that the innocent party would prevail in the duel. This wasn't just superstition, but reflected a deeply held religious and cultural conviction. The idea that divine intervention would ensure the victory of the innocent party carried significant weight in both Roman and medieval societies. This belief was so strong that even if one party was clearly at a disadvantage, they were still expected to participate in the combat, as their innocence would supposedly grant them victory. The influence of this Roman practice can be seen in the medieval system of trial by combat, where similar beliefs and procedures were followed. The concept of resolving disputes through physical combat has a rich historical precedent that shaped later legal systems. As we continue to explore the history of trial by combat, it becomes clear how ancient practices and beliefs have left an indelible mark on subsequent legal systems, shaping how justice has been sought and administered over time. This understanding of the origins and evolution of trial by combat helps us appreciate the complexity and depth of medieval legal practices, as well as their connection to earlier civilizations. Moreover, it highlights how beliefs in divine intervention have played a significant role in shaping our understanding of guilt and innocence throughout history. In Great Britain and Ireland, trial by combat became a primary means of resolving legal disputes when other methods failed to provide clear answers. The belief that the innocent would prevail in battle was deeply ingrained in medieval culture. The system required a legal question that could not be resolved otherwise. If two parties were at odds over land rights or accusations of wrongdoing, trial by combat was seen as the ultimate test. In England during Anglo-Saxon times, this reliance on oaths and physical trials to determine guilt or innocence was already well established. As the Middle Ages progressed, trial by combat became increasingly formalized. By the 15th century, trial by combat had been used so widely that it was considered a central part of medieval judicial practices. The belief in divine intervention played a crucial role in these trials, with many seeing the outcome as proof of God's will. This sets the stage for a deeper exploration into how these ancient practices have influenced modern legal systems and our collective understanding of justice. In the medieval world, the outcome of a trial by combat was often seen as a direct reflection of divine truth. The battlefield served as both a courtroom and a proving ground, where combatants faced off to settle legal disputes. Combatants were often armed with weapons typical of the era: swords, shields, and other medieval armaments. Swords were the primary weapon of choice, symbolizing skill, strength, and chivalry. Shields provided defensive protection, representing the combatant's resolve and determination. The stakes were high, the victor was considered innocent, and the loser guilty by divine decree. Battles were fierce and bloody, with each combatant fighting to the best of their ability. The belief was that divine intervention would aid the innocent, ensuring they emerged victorious. This dramatic process was seen as a powerful way to determine guilt or innocence in the absence of other evidence. The outcome of these trials held great significance and gravity, shaping the legal landscape of medieval times. Trial by combat was a vivid example of how justice was sought through physical prowess and divine intervention. From the very beginning, trial by combat was intertwined with religious beliefs and practices. The Catholic Church, a powerful institution in medieval Europe, played a significant role in the development and regulation of this ancient legal practice. In medieval times, the Church saw trial by combat as a way to prove innocence through divine intervention. The belief was that God would grant victory to the innocent party in a physical fight. This faith was deeply rooted in religious teachings and doctrines. Through its vast influence, the Catholic Church regulated how these trials were conducted. They ensured that the process followed certain rituals and protocols. For instance, the accused and their accuser had to swear oaths in a church before engaging in combat. This was seen as a sacred duty, not just a legal one. The Church's involvement also meant that trial by combat was not merely about physical strength, but also about moral righteousness. This intertwining of religion and law underscores how deeply beliefs shaped legal practices in medieval society. Over time, as the Church's power waned and new legal systems emerged, trial by combat began to decline, showing that changes in belief can reshape entire judicial frameworks. In the heart of medieval Europe, a unique system of justice held sway: trial by combat. This method was more than just an alternative way to resolve legal disputes. It was rooted in deep faith and supernatural beliefs. Central to this practice was the belief that divine power would intervene to protect the innocent. The combatants were not merely fighting for their lives, they believed God would support the righteous fighter and ensure justice was served. This idea extended to other forms of trial by ordeal as well. Trials, like the ordeal of bleeding, where a wound was observed for signs of healing, were based on the belief that if innocent, God would perform a miracle to save their life. However, not everyone agreed with this approach. In the 13th century, a papal decree aimed to stop priests from taking part in these trials due to concerns about testing God's intervention. Despite this, the belief that God would protect the innocent remained deeply entrenched in medieval legal practices. These beliefs underpinned an entire system of justice, highlighting the profound faith and supernatural elements that shaped medieval trials by combat. While the belief in divine intervention and honor played crucial roles in medieval trial by combat, not all accused individuals were equally positioned to defend their innocence through physical prowess. In this system, the duel was seen as a ritualized form of proof that aligned with a society built around honor and status. However, the practical challenges were significant. Not everyone who was accused had the privilege of training or being equipped with martial skills necessary for a duel. This inherent inequality could severely impact the outcome. Moreover, physical fitness varied greatly among individuals. A person's health and strength at the time of their accusation could determine their fate. This system placed a significant burden on those who might not have been trained fighters or were not in peak physical condition, making it difficult for them to prove their innocence. Despite these religious convictions, the practical difficulties and biases inherent in trial by combat began to undermine its legitimacy. As time progressed, these inequities became increasingly apparent, leading to questions about the fairness of a system that relied heavily on physical prowess and perceived divine favor. This realization paved the way for the eventual decline of trial by combat, highlighting the need for a more equitable system of justice that didn't hinge on physical strength. In 1386, two Frenchmen squared off in a grim spectacle that would decide not just their fate, but the outcome of a complex legal dispute. This was trial by combat, a practice where two accused parties or their champions fought to determine guilt or innocence. This notable case, among many others, highlights the real-world application of trial by combat in medieval Europe. The duelists were Jacques Legrand and Jean de Carouge. Both men were from powerful families, each with their own supporters and interests at stake. Their weapons of choice were maces, blunt instruments designed to incapacitate rather than kill outright. This method was believed to leave the outcome more clearly in God's hands. The clash took place on a makeshift arena, surrounded by spectators who held their breath as the two men met in combat. The stakes were high, not just for the duelists, but for all those watching and waiting to see justice unfold. Jean de Carouge emerged victorious, his mace proving mightier than that of Jacques Legrand. In the eyes of medieval society, this was divine judgment. Carouge's was innocent, and Legrand guilty. But the tale doesn't end there. Despite his victory in combat, Jean de Carouge faced further challenges, demonstrating that trial by combat was just one part of a complex legal system. A few years later, another notable example unfolded in Augsburg, Germany in 1409. Wilhelm von Dornsberg and Theodor Haschnack engaged in a trial by combat to resolve a dispute over land rights. This case, too, was steeped in the belief that divine intervention would favor the innocent party. The duelists fought with swords, their skill and stamina put to the test. These historical examples underscore how trial by combat was not just a spectacle, but a deeply held belief system woven into medieval justice. Over time, the practice of trial by combat began to decline as legal systems evolved towards more equitable methods that didn't rely solely on physical strength or divine intervention. The 1386 duel between Legrand and de Carouge stands as a poignant reminder of this transition, a window into a world where justice was sought not just through law, but also through the will of God. This shift in legal practice would eventually lead to the abolition of trial by combat, as seen notably with King Louis IX of France's decision to do away with this method entirely. In exploring these notable cases, we see how the origins, methods, beliefs, and decline of trial by combat played out in real-world scenarios, illustrating its profound impact on medieval justice. By the 16th century, the use of trial by combat began to decline in Great Britain and Ireland. While this method had been deeply ingrained in their legal traditions, several factors contributed to its fall from favor. One major reason was the increasing skepticism towards the belief that divine intervention would ensure the innocent prevailed in a combat trial. This set a precedent that challenged the validity of these trials, undermining the faith-based premise on which they relied. Additionally, the brutality and unpredictability of these contests raised ethical concerns. Not everyone accused was trained or fit to fight, leading to unfair outcomes. This system, once seen as a test of honor and divine will, started appearing more barbaric and less reliable as societies evolved. This move signaled a wider acceptance that justice should be based on evidence and logical deliberations rather than physical prowess or divine intervention. By the 16th century, Great Britain and Ireland followed suit, gradually phasing out this method in favor of more systematic approaches like jury trials. Even in modern times, the idea of trial by combat has a certain appeal. This modern echo highlights the enduring fascination with medieval practices. The idea of settling disputes through physical combat resonates deeply in our collective consciousness. It taps into our ancestral notions of justice and truth, where strength and courage were seen as divine blessings. The belief that God would intervene on behalf of the innocent made trial by combat a potent symbol of divine justice. Even today, there is a lingering sense that physical prowess can be a measure of integrity and righteousness. This medieval practice continues to have an appeal that transcends time. Perhaps it is because we still yearn for a clear, decisive method of proving innocence or guilt. While trial by combat has largely been relegated to history and fiction, its enduring fascination reflects our ongoing search for truth and justice. These modern echoes underscore the timeless relevance of this ancient practice in our collective psyche. Norse culture, deeply rooted in mythology and pagan beliefs, held a unique fascination with divine intervention. One practice that reflected this belief was holmgang. Holmgang, literally meaning island fighting, was a form of duel used to settle disputes among the Vikings. In this ritual, two combatants would face off on a small island or within a defined area, fighting until one emerged victorious. The belief was that the gods would favor the just and innocent combatant, ensuring their victory. This concept of divine intervention in determining innocence or guilt was not isolated to Norse culture. As Vikings explored and settled across Europe, they brought with them this belief in trial by combat. In medieval Europe, this idea took root and evolved into the legal practice of trial by combat. Here, disputes were resolved not just among nobles, but also in cases where other means of proof were insufficient. The Norse influence on European legal practices provides a window into how ancient beliefs can shape modern institutions. Understanding this historical context helps explain the enduring allure and significance of trial by combat in our collective psyche. In the Middle Ages, when two parties entered into trial by combat to prove their innocence or guilt, heraldry played a pivotal role in signaling identity and intent. Coats of arms, banners, and personal symbols were not merely decorative. They conveyed crucial information about the combatant's lineage, allegiances, and claims to nobility. These heraldic displays were essential for spectators and officials to distinguish between opponents, as they often wore similar armor that made personal recognition difficult. For example, the banner of a knight would bear his coat of arms, which not only identified him but also represented the honor and reputation he sought to defend in battle. The meaning behind these symbols was deeply rooted in medieval culture, where lineage and personal reputation held significant weight. Thus, the outcome of a trial by combat not only determined guilt or innocence, but also reflected on the familial and social status of the participants. Each symbol carried its own story, tracing back to ancestral deeds and achievements that shaped the family's legacy. In essence, heraldic symbols wove together personal and familial identities into the process of determining guilt or innocence in trial by combat. The code of chivalry played a significant role in the conduct and outcomes of medieval trial by combat, a practice that allowed litigants to prove their innocence through physical fighting. In this system, chivalric principles such as honor, courage, and mercy were central to the perception of justice. Honor was paramount. A knight's reputation was often considered more valuable than his life. Courage was expected in the face of adversity, and it was believed that divine intervention would support the righteous fighter. Mercy was not just a virtue but an essential aspect of combat, as the loser might be spared if they showed remorse or submitted. These chivalric codes ensured that trials by combat were more than mere displays of strength. They were tests of character and nobility. The outcome of a trial was not just about guilt or innocence, but also about the ethical considerations guiding each combatant's actions. This intersection of law, honor, and religion shaped the perception of justice in medieval society. Ultimately, the chivalric codes brought a layer of moral complexity to the otherwise brutal practice of trial by combat. In medieval Europe, the method of trial by combat evolved significantly over time. This was not merely a test of physical prowess, but also an assessment of divine favor and personal honor. And at the heart of this evolution lay the advancements in weapon technology. However, As trial by combat became more formalized and integrated into legal practices, specialized tools began to emerge. The mace, for example, was a blunt force weapon designed specifically for combat situations. The warhammer, with its heavy head and long handle, became another favored choice among combatants. These weapons were particularly effective in trial by combat, where brute force often determined the outcome. But perhaps the most significant development was the longsword. With its extended reach and versatile design, it could be used both for cutting and thrusting. These advancements in weaponry had profound implications. The longsword, for instance, required a higher level of skill and training, making it less accessible to common men. This shift meant that trials by combat increasingly favored the nobility, who had access to better training and more specialized weapons. In turn, this further solidified the social hierarchy of medieval Europe, where physical prowess and martial skill were key markers of status and honor. Ultimately, the evolution in weapon technology altered not just the methods, but also the outcomes of trial by combat, shaping who would emerge victorious and thereby determining guilt or innocence. And as these weapons became more sophisticated, the practice itself became increasingly ritualized, fitting a society built around honor and personal reputation. As the art of combat evolved, so did the understanding of its consequences. Physicians and healers became integral figures in medieval legal practices, particularly around trial by combat. Their roles ranged from preparing the combatants before the duel to tending to their wounds afterward. Injuries sustained during these trials could be severe, requiring skilled medical intervention. Some prominent healers of the time included the renowned Hildegard von Bingen, whose expertise in both medicine and spirituality was unparalleled. She authored works on natural healing, herbal remedies, and the interplay between physical health and divine intervention. Through their practices, these healers not only treated injuries but also helped maintain the belief that the outcome of a trial by combat was divinely determined. The interplay between physical combat and medieval medicine underscores how deeply integrated these systems were within the broader societal framework. This intersection highlights the complexity of medieval legal practices and the critical role healers played in maintaining both justice and faith within their communities. As trials by combat began to wane, so too did the prominence of these healers within legal contexts, marking a shift towards more modern medical practices. In medieval Europe, trials by combat weren't just about determining guilt or innocence. They had profound economic consequences. Their supporters might include healers, heralds, and even priests to ensure their champion was fit for battle. These additional expenses could quickly add up, creating a significant financial burden on the litigants. For wealthier participants, this might have been manageable, but for those of lesser means, it could be ruinous. The winner not only gained legal vindication, but also the right to seize their opponent's property. This redistribution of wealth could have significant economic ramifications in local communities. In some cases, the victor might even be awarded additional lands or titles, further altering the social landscape. Thus, the medieval justice system's reliance on trial by combat not only determined guilt or innocence, but also reshaped economic fortunes. The size of these crowds could vary greatly, depending on the significance of the case and the status of those involved. For high-stakes trials involving nobles or prominent figures, the number of spectators could easily reach into the thousands. The presence of such large crowds underscored the seriousness and importance of these legal proceedings. The behavior of the crowd was a mix of anticipation, excitement, and solemnity. They would often remain silent, their eyes fixed on the combatants. Spectators expected to see divine intervention in action. If the innocent party prevailed in combat, it was believed that God had directly influenced the outcome. The impact of public opinion on trial outcomes was profound. A victorious combatant not only established their innocence, but also gained social standing and respect within the community. This system, though brutal by modern standards, held immense significance in medieval society. It was a tangible demonstration of divine justice and a testament to one's honor and bravery. Public support could also sway the outcome, as even a skilled fighter might feel pressured under the watchful eyes of hundreds or thousands of spectators. The belief that the innocent would be divinely favored added another layer of tension and anticipation to these trials. Over time, as societies evolved and new legal frameworks emerged, trial by combat began to decline. Yet for centuries, it was an integral part of medieval justice, shaped significantly by the expectations and beliefs of its spectators. In this way, public opinion played a crucial role in shaping the outcomes and significance of medieval trials by combat. In the Middle Ages, legal theory began to grapple with the complexities of determining guilt or innocence through physical combat. Influential scholars like Gratian and Peter Abelard explored the theoretical justifications for this belief. Gratian, in his Decretum, argued that divine intervention played a crucial role in determining outcomes of trials by combat. Abelard, on the other hand, questioned the reliance on divine intervention and emphasized the importance of human judgment and evidence. As legal theory evolved, it became clear that relying solely on God's intervention was insufficient for a fair justice system. The idea that the innocent would prevail in combat began to be challenged by practical realities and logical inconsistencies. Scholars started to consider alternative methods of proving innocence that did not rely solely on divine power. This shift in legal thinking paved the way for the development of more structured and fair judicial processes in medieval Europe. Over time, these theoretical debates and practical adjustments shaped how trials by combat were conducted and perceived. Ultimately, the evolution of legal theory adapted to and influenced the practice of trial by combat, reflecting a deeper understanding of justice and human fallibility. While the ritual of trial by combat may have been seen as a divine method to establish guilt or innocence, it had profound psychological effects on both participants and spectators. Imagine the mental strain for combatants, knowing that their fate hinged on a physical battle to the death or near death. For them, it was more than just a test of skill. It was a grueling examination of their very innocence. Spectators, too, felt the weight of this ordeal. They would watch in anxious anticipation, their emotions swaying with each blow and counterblow. This faith in a higher power could either reinforce confidence or instill fear, depending on one's conviction and circumstances. Furthermore, the outcome of these trials had far-reaching consequences, not only for the accused, but also for their families and communities. A loss could mean the end of a lineage, the dissolution of property, or the shattering of a family's reputation. This psychological pressure extended to spectators who grappled with the moral and ethical implications of such trials. Witnessing violence as a means of justice could challenge their understanding of fairness and mercy. In essence, the practice of trial by combat was not merely a legal procedure, it was a deeply psychological experience for all involved. This understanding highlights the complex interplay between law, honor, and religion in medieval society. Ultimately, the psychological impact of trial by combat underscores the broader societal effects of this practice. It was a system that not only determined guilt or innocence, but also left indelible marks on the minds and hearts of those who participated in it. Medieval trial by combat was not merely a physical contest, it was steeped in supernatural beliefs and celestial interpretations. Astrology and divination played crucial roles in determining the outcome of these trials, with predictions and omens seen as indicators of divine favor or disfavor. In medieval Europe, trial by combat was more than just a means of determining guilt or innocence. It was a reflection of the society's deep-rooted honor code. Honor in medieval society wasn't merely about personal integrity, it encompassed status, reputation, and one's place within the social hierarchy. This honor code was so profound that it could dictate the outcome of a trial by combat. But why would this system rely so heavily on honor and combat? Similarly, trial by combat was viewed as a means for God to support the righteous fighter in battle. Thus, honor and divine intervention were deeply intertwined concepts in medieval justice. This disparity could significantly impact the outcomes of trials by combat, which often relied on personal skill and martial prowess. Illuminating the cultural values driving combat trials, it's clear that honor and divine favor played crucial roles in medieval justice. These principles not only determined outcomes, but also shaped the behavior of those involved in these trials. In the Middle Ages, trial by combat was more than just a legal procedure. It served as a potent tool for political manipulation. Rulers and the powerful often used these trials strategically to maintain their grip on power. By strategically using trials by combat, rulers could maintain their power and shape the political landscape in their favor. The loser was not only deemed guilty, but often suffered significant consequences that benefited those in charge. The impact of these trials on the political landscape was profound. They reinforced the power dynamics and ensured that the rulers maintained their control over the population. By the 15th century, trials by ordeal and combat had largely disappeared in Europe, replaced by more reliable methods of determining guilt or innocence. However, their legacy as a tool for political manipulation endured. Exploring these trials reveals not only a fascination with divine intervention, but also a stark political strategy that maintained power and shaped history. In the dense forests of medieval Europe, for example, trials often took place on open fields carved out from the woods. These clearings served as symbolic spaces where justice could be meted out, free from the tangled shadows and hidden dangers of the forest. The choice of such locations was not arbitrary but deeply meaningful. The open field represented a place of clarity and truth, where hidden deceptions could find no refuge. Similarly, in the rugged mountains of Scotland or the Swiss Alps, trials might be held on steep slopes or high plateaus where the uneven terrain was believed to offer an advantage to the innocent. The logic was that if God favored the innocent, then the uneven ground would somehow level the playing field, making the outcome less about physical prowess and more about divine intervention. In some regions, like the marshlands of eastern England, trials by combat were staged on floating platforms or rafts built from local timber. These makeshift arenas were designed to simulate the instability of a boat at sea, challenging combatants to maintain balance while fighting. The belief was that only those truly innocent could navigate the unsteady surface without faltering, thus proving their divine righteousness. Across Europe, the resources and terrain of each region shaped not only where trials were held, but also how they unfolded. Beyond the battlefield, superstitions played a pivotal role in medieval trial by combat. Combatants often believed that the outcome of their battle was influenced by divine intervention. They would perform rituals and seek omens before the fight, hoping to gain insight into their fate. One common belief was that if the combatant saw an owl before the fight, it was a sign of misfortune. Conversely, seeing a raven was considered auspicious, as it was thought to be the bird of wisdom. The color of their clothing also held significance. Wearing red was seen as a symbol of courage and strength. Some combatants carried talismans or wore charms believed to ward off evil spirits and bring good fortune. These superstitions added an extra layer of mysticism to the trials, heightening the tension and drama. It was not just about physical prowess, it was also about faith and the will of a higher power. As trials continued across Europe, these beliefs and practices became deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric. They offered a sense of control amidst the chaos and uncertainty of medieval life. The declining use of trial by combat in the 16th century left a void that would be filled by other forms of justice. But the memory of these ancient practices continues to resonate in our cultural consciousness. While the memory of medieval trial by combat resonates in our cultural consciousness, another factor played a significant role in shaping this ancient legal practice: climate. In the harsh winters of medieval Europe, trial by combat posed unique challenges to both participants and observers. The cold weather could affect the physical condition of the combatants, making it more difficult for them to fight effectively. To counteract this, some regions adopted specific preparations for the combatants during colder months. In warmer climates, such as Spain and Italy, trial by combat might be conducted under different conditions to avoid extreme temperatures. These measures ensured that the outcome of the combat was seen as fair and a true reflection of divine intervention or the fighter's skill. However, climate wasn't the only factor that influenced how and when these trials were conducted. The social status of the participants also played a crucial role in determining the conditions under which they would fight. Nobles and knights often had access to better training and equipment, which could mitigate the challenges posed by harsh weather. As a result, climate played a complex role in shaping the practice of trial by combat, interacting with social hierarchies and local customs. This intricate relationship between climate and legal practices underscores how deeply entwined these aspects were in medieval society. Understanding these factors helps us appreciate the intricacies of a system that relied on both divine intervention and human skill. By the medieval period, these practices had become formalized into legal codes. In medieval Europe, trial by combat was a recognized method of settling disputes, with specific laws governing how these trials were conducted. Understanding these changes helps us trace how legal thinking about combat evolved over time, contributing to its eventual decline as a primary method for determining guilt or innocence. Merchant guilds, powerful associations of traders, often turned to trial by combat to settle their disputes. These guilds held substantial economic influence and frequently found themselves in conflicts over trade rights, market access, and business deals. The wealth gap in medieval society was starkly evident in access to combat trials. While nobles had the means and training to fight for their innocence, many commoners did not. In such cases, merchants who could afford champions or had connections within noble circles often fared better in these trials than their less affluent counterparts. As the Middle Ages progressed and the role of merchants grew more prominent, so did their influence in these trials. Yet, this power was often wielded by those who could afford it. The decline of trial by combat in the later Middle Ages also coincided with shifts in economic power and legal practices that diminished the role of merchants in these trials. Illustrating these socioeconomic dynamics helps us understand the broader context and significance of trial by combat in medieval justice. Before the establishment of modern legal systems, medieval justice relied heavily on trial by combat. This ancient practice was deeply interwoven with folklore and cultural beliefs that influenced its outcomes and symbolic interpretations. One common belief held that the innocent would always prevail in a trial by combat, regardless of their skill or the balance of forces at play. This idea was often reinforced through local legends and tales. In many regions, stories were told of seemingly mismatched fighters where the underdog, who was believed to be innocent, miraculously won their battle. These narratives served as both inspiration and reassurance that justice would ultimately be served. For instance, the tale of a small, unassuming knight who faced off against a seasoned warrior was often recounted with the moral that no matter how formidable the opponent, if God was on the innocent's side, victory would be theirs. The symbolism within these stories extended beyond individual trials. They shaped public perception and trust in the legal system itself. The belief that divine intervention played a role in determining guilt or innocence was a comforting thought for many. These narratives also served to reinforce the concept of chivalry and honor, which were fundamental to medieval society. The knight who fought with bravery and valor, regardless of the outcome, was still considered noble. In some cases, The results of trials by combat were interpreted as signs or omens from a higher power. If an accused person won their fight, it was seen as evidence that God had intervened on their behalf. However, not all trials by combat were straightforward victories for the innocent. There were instances where an accused person was found guilty, leading to a reevaluation of their innocence. This complexity highlights how deeply entwined medieval justice systems were with cultural beliefs and superstitions. The idea that divine intervention would always guarantee a just outcome was not always borne out in practice. As the Middle Ages progressed, the influence of folklore and local legends on trials by combat began to wane. The rise of more formalized legal systems led to a shift in how guilt and innocence were determined. Ultimately, the decline of trial by combat reflects a broader societal shift, away from relying on superstition and folklore towards more structured and empirical methods of justice. Examining the role of folklore in medieval trials by combat reveals how deeply intertwined legal practices were with cultural beliefs and public perception during this era. This understanding is crucial for appreciating the evolution of justice systems and the enduring influence that folklore continues to exert on our perceptions of law and order. In the intricate dance of medieval power, political marriages were not just unions of love, but strategic alliances that could shift the balance of legal systems. When Henry II of England insisted on trial by one's peers, he was setting a precedent that would echo through centuries. This belief lent a profound religious and moral weight to trial by combat, making it a cornerstone of medieval justice systems. Political marriages played a crucial role in shaping the outcomes of these trials. In an era where alliances were forged through marriage, the victor in a combat trial could gain not only legal exoneration, but also significant political capital. A nobleman who proved his innocence in combat might see his status and influence rise, opening doors to new alliances and consolidating his power base. Conversely, a loss could spell not just legal ruin, but also the dissolution of political ties and the weakening of one's standing in court politics. Royal consorts, with their intimate connections to the throne, could also wield considerable influence over legal decisions. Their support or opposition could sway the course of a trial by combat, reflecting the delicate balance of power within the royal court. As the medieval era progressed, this system began to shift, with trials by jury becoming more common. Yet, the echoes of trial by combat persist, reminding us of a time when might and divine favor intertwined in the pursuit of justice. The political intricacies and power dynamics at play in trial by combat offer a glimpse into the rich tapestry of medieval life, where legal outcomes could shape not just individual fates, but also the course of dynasties and empires. The medieval era witnessed the evolution of legal practices, including trial by combat, which began as a means to settle private disputes between individuals. Over time, these trials shifted from resolving personal grievances to becoming state-sponsored events. As time progressed, the methods of trial by combat became more centralized. Specific procedures were established for how these combats should be conducted, ensuring fairness and orderliness. Official promoters of judicial combat began to emerge, tasked with organizing and overseeing these trials. These individuals ensured that the combats were conducted according to established rules and customs. The rise of official promoters and centralized procedures illustrates how trial by combat adapted over centuries to maintain its role in determining guilt or innocence through physical combat. By the 15th century, the use of trial by combat began to decline as other methods of determining guilt or innocence gained prominence. However, its legacy remains a fascinating chapter in the evolution of legal practices. This adaptation highlights the broader trends in medieval legal systems, where centralization and formal procedures became increasingly important. Before we delve into the intricacies of medieval trial by combat, let's explore a lesser-known factor that influenced its practice: alchemy. In medieval times, alchemists held significant sway, not just in their laboratories but also within the legal system. Their pursuit of turning base metals into gold wasn't merely a quest for wealth, it was intertwined with beliefs about divine intervention and truth-seeking. The influence of alchemy in trial by combat is evident in the use of potions and elixirs that were believed to enhance the combatant's chances. These concoctions, often shrouded in secrecy, were said to provide strength, speed, or even divine favor during the fight. For instance, some alchemical texts provided recipes for such potent brews. One notable example is the Treatise on Alchemies by an anonymous author, which includes detailed instructions for creating a powerful potion said to invigorate warriors before battle. Prominent alchemists like Albertus Magnus and Nicholas Flamel are known not only for their experimental work, but also for their contributions to legal practices. Their writings on the subject of trial by combat highlight the belief that divine intervention played a crucial role in determining the outcome. Their influence extended beyond theoretical writings. In practice, alchemists were often called upon to prepare these potions for both the accused and their accusers before a trial by combat. As the practice of trial by combat waned with the rise of more formalized legal systems, the influence of alchemy began to fade as well. Yet it serves as a fascinating reminder of how the pursuit of truth and justice was interwoven with beliefs about the supernatural in medieval times. Ultimately, the story of alchemy and trial by combat highlights the intricate tapestry of medieval legal systems, where science, faith, and the quest for justice converged in complex ways. Clerical figures played a crucial role in these trials, their interventions often determining the course and outcome of combat. In one notable case, a cleric interceded before the duel began. He declared that it was not in God's will for the battle to proceed. The trial was halted, and the accused was judged based on other evidence. The cleric's motivation was driven by the belief that God would not permit an innocent person to lose in a divine test of strength and truth. However, this belief was not universally accepted. Some theologians argued that the divine will did not necessarily prevent the innocent from losing in combat. These debates highlighted a deeper tension within medieval Christianity regarding the role of divine intervention in human affairs. The controversy ultimately contributed to the decline of trial by combat as a legitimate legal practice. Religious authorities began to distance themselves from the practice, citing theological concerns and a growing preference for more predictable and less violent means of determining guilt or innocence. Thus, the influence of clerical intervention and theological debates shaped not only individual trials, but also the broader evolution of medieval legal systems. One of the darker aspects of these trials was the use of poisons to gain an unfair advantage. Examples from historical records show that combatants would resort to hidden potions or blades coated with deadly substances, hoping to sway the outcome in their favor. Methods used included applying poisonous ointments to weapons or ingesting concoctions meant to enhance strength or endurance. Substances like nightshade, hemlock, and various types of fungi were employed for their potent toxic effects. Attempts at detection often involved a close examination of the combatant's equipment and bodily signs. However, due to the rudimentary understanding of toxicology, many instances went undetected. This practice highlighted the lengths people would go to manipulate results in these trials. This dark side of medieval trial by combat reveals a deeper layer of intrigue and deception that accompanied the quest for justice during this era. It underscores the lengths people were willing to go to ensure their innocence was proven, even if it meant resorting to underhanded tactics. Imagine, if you will, a medieval courtroom. The air is heavy with anticipation, and the rustle of chainmail hints at the gravity of the moment. At the center stands not one but two combatants, each clad in armor, gripping swords. Their fate rests not on human testimony or evidence, but on divine intervention. Consider the tales of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. Their quests were often supernatural, filled with enchanted swords and magical aid. Stories like these were not just entertainment. They permeated the collective consciousness and shaped beliefs about divine intervention. In the context of trial by combat, this meant that the outcome of a duel was seen as a reflection not only of skill, but also of divine favor. Those who believed in the power of mythical creatures might have thought that invoking such beings could sway the battle in their favor. While there are no records of combatants literally invoking dragons or griffins, the belief that divine power would support the righteous was pervasive. It's not hard to imagine that a combatant might have felt an extra boost of confidence, believing in the support of some higher force. The rich tapestry of medieval beliefs that underpin the practice of trial by combat illustrates how deeply intertwined law, honor, and religion were in this era. In the end, it was a system that reflected not just the pursuit of justice, but also the profound spiritual and cultural beliefs of its time. Beyond deciding guilt or innocence, trial by combat held a mystical allure in medieval Europe. The belief that magic could sway the outcome of duels ran deep, shaping how these trials were conducted and perceived. Accused individuals often took precautions against black magic or curses. Rituals performed before combat aimed to ward off any malevolent spells that could influence the fight's outcome. These rituals might involve the use of sacred objects or incantations, believed to protect the accused from any dark forces attempting to intervene. The outcome of these duels was seen as a divine judgment, reflecting the innocence or guilt of the participants. Any victory was attributed to God's favor rather than mere skill. Accusations of sorcery could themselves lead to trials by combat, as the accuser sought a divine verdict on the guilt or innocence of their adversary. In some instances, the accused might be subjected to ordeals, such as holding red-hot iron or walking on heated bars, to test their innocence before engaging in combat. The belief in the power of magic and divine intervention was so profound that it became an integral part of the legal system's mystique. This shift marked the end of an era where battles were not just physical contests, but also spiritual trials, reflecting the profound beliefs and fears of medieval society. Before trial by combat was replaced by modern jury systems, the outcome of disputes often hinged on supernatural beliefs and practices. In medieval Europe, the practice of trial by combat relied heavily on demonological ideas. People believed that demons could influence the outcome of a duel, making it more than just a physical contest, but also a spiritual trial. Exorcisms were often performed before duels to ensure that neither combatant was possessed by demons, which could sway the fight in their favor. In some cases, demonic possession was cited as a reason for a combat to be held, adding another layer of complexity to these trials. These beliefs highlight the deep religious and supernatural dimensions woven into the fabric of medieval justice. In one notable case, a seer was consulted prior to a trial by combat. The seer declared that the victor would be known by his ability to disarm his opponent with a single blow. As the two champions faced off in the arena, the crowd held their breath. The prophecy had set the stage for what was about to unfold. As the battle commenced, one of the combatants managed to strike his opponent with such precision that he was able to dislodge his sword from its scabbard in a single fluid motion. The crowd erupted in cheers, recognizing the fulfillment of the prophecy. This outcome not only decided the legal case, but also strengthened the belief that divine intervention had guided the victor's hand. However, prophecies could also be used to challenge the results of a trial by combat. In one instance, a combatant who was declared innocent based on winning the battle faced subsequent scrutiny due to an unfavorable omen that had preceded the fight. A sudden storm that appeared during the combat was interpreted as a sign from the heavens questioning his innocence. This led to an investigation where the omen's implications were considered alongside other evidence. While the combatant had prevailed in the physical battle, the perceived divine disapproval cast doubt on his innocence. This case highlights how deeply intertwined legal practices and supernatural beliefs were during the medieval period. Over time, as trial by combat began to decline in favor of more rational judicial systems, so too did the reliance on prophecies and omens. Yet, these ancient traditions continue to fascinate us today, revealing the complex interplay between faith, justice, and the quest for truth in medieval Europe. Perhaps it is this very complexity that draws us to study the past, seeking insights into our own beliefs and the systems we have built to uphold them. As we delve deeper into these histories, it becomes clear that the fabric of justice is woven not only with threads of law and reason, but also with strands of faith, prophecy, and the enduring search for truth. This blend of spirituality and justice continues to shape our understanding of law and its role in society today. In the medieval world, where justice was intertwined with faith and honor, another powerful force influenced trial outcomes: medicine. It's the Middle Ages, and a dispute over royal succession is tearing apart a kingdom. In the medieval world, political motivations drove many of these trials. Kings and nobles often used this method to legitimize their claims to the throne or settle succession disputes. Trial by combat played a crucial role in medieval politics, as it offered a dramatic and highly visible way to settle high-stakes disputes. Today, the idea of resolving legal disputes through physical combat may seem archaic, but it highlights the intertwined nature of law, faith, and politics in medieval times. This historical practice underscores the significant role that trial by combat played in determining guilt or innocence, especially in matters of royal succession. In this era where justice was intertwined with faith and honor, trial by combat offered a dramatic resolution to high-stakes disputes. The belief in the supernatural permeated every aspect of this legal system, including the use of judicial magic, rituals, talismans, or spells believed to influence the outcome of trials. In some cases, a sorcerer might be consulted before combat, tasked with casting protective spells over the accused. These spells were often inscribed on parchment, worn as talismans under the combatant's armor to ensure divine intervention in their favor. Another common practice was the use of sacred relics believed to possess miraculous powers. A tiny fragment from a saint's bone or a splinter of wood from Christ's cross could be worn into battle, offering divine protection and increasing the chances of victory. For many, these practices offered not only physical protection, but also psychological assurance in the face of a daunting challenge. The belief in judicial magic underscores how deeply intertwined law, honor, and religion were in medieval Europe, shaping every aspect of their justice system. Centuries before the modern legal system, trials were often resolved through physical combat. This practice, known as trial by combat, was deeply intertwined with religious beliefs and rituals. Saints and relics played a crucial role in determining guilt or innocence during these trials. Sacred items, such as relics from revered saints, were sometimes brought into the arena. Combatants would touch these relics or wear them as amulets. For example, a fighter might wear a small reliquary containing a bone fragment of St. George around their neck, believing it would protect them during the fight. These rituals were not merely symbolic, they were deeply ingrained in the belief that divine power could intervene on behalf of the innocent. The religious climate of the Middle Ages was fraught with tension and suspicion. Accusations of heresy were grave and could lead to severe consequences. In cases where guilt or innocence couldn't be determined through other means, trial by combat was invoked. One notable example involved a heretic accused of defying the Church's teachings. Faced with no conclusive evidence, he was challenged to a trial by combat. The religious establishment believed that the innocent would prevail in such trials, as divine intervention was thought to favor them. However, this belief didn't always hold true, and some innocents met their end in these brutal contests. Despite the risks, trial by combat remained a recognized method for resolving ecclesiastical disputes until the practice began to decline. By the late Middle Ages, the use of trial by combat for heresy cases had significantly diminished, reflecting broader shifts in legal and religious practices. But the roots of this practice run deep into the heart of medieval Europe, where religious orders played a crucial role. Monastic and mendicant orders, such as the Benedictines and Franciscans, were often consulted for their wisdom and guidance. Their views on divine intervention were deeply ingrained in the cultural fabric of trial by combat. In one notable incident, a Franciscan friar advised on a trial by combat in the early 14th century. The friar's counsel was sought because of his perceived closeness to divine wisdom. His presence was seen as a guiding light in the midst of uncertainty and fear. The trial itself was a spectacle of faith and determination. As the champions clashed in fierce combat, the villagers watched with bated breath. The involvement of religious orders in these trials provides insight into the broader social and spiritual context that shaped medieval justice. Their role was not just to offer guidance, but also to lend a sense of divine legitimacy to the proceedings. Medieval art, with its vivid tapestries and illuminated manuscripts, played a crucial role in shaping beliefs about trial by combat. Detailed depictions of trials by combat adorned the margins of legal documents and religious texts. The images were not just decorative. They conveyed a powerful message about divine intervention and justice through physical combat. These visual representations were not merely passive, they actively influenced public perception of trial by combat as a legitimate means of determining guilt or innocence. The belief in divine intervention was so deeply ingrained that even the outcome of a trial by combat was seen as evidence of God's will. Thus, visual culture played a significant role in reinforcing and perpetuating beliefs that physical strength reflected divine favor and ensured justice. Beyond the raw physical spectacle, trial by combat was rich in ritual and ceremony that lent it profound symbolic weight. Every detail was designed to invoke divine presence and bestow a sense of sacrality upon the proceedings. Combatants would often begin their preparation with religious invocations, seeking divine favor and protection before entering the fray. Weapons, too, were often consecrated, blessed with sacred rites to imbue them with spiritual significance. This ritualistic preparation ensured that the fight was not merely a test of physical prowess, but also an arena where divine will played out visibly. After the combat, the declaration of the victor was a solemn ritual in itself, with the presiding authority often using sacred language to pronounce judgment. This ceremonial aspect elevated the trial beyond a simple legal process, embedding it within a framework of divine justice and spiritual drama. It was this complex interplay between religious belief, legal procedure, and physical conflict that made trial by combat such a compelling and enduring practice. Even as the world moved away from this form of justice, the legacy of these rituals echoes in our understanding of law's deeper spiritual dimensions. As medieval Europe embraced the spectacle of trial by combat, an often overlooked group played a vital role in these dramatic proceedings: women. Women served as spectators, eagerly watching these duels unfold. Their presence at these events was not merely passive, they brought an energy and anticipation that permeated the atmosphere. But their involvement went beyond merely witnessing the combat. Women also acted as supporters and champions of those who fought in these trials. In some cases, women themselves took part in these trials, fighting to prove their innocence or the righteousness of their cause. Jeanne de Clisson is a notable example. Widowed after her husband was executed for treason, she fought 2 duels to clear his name. In another instance, Mathilde de Flandre, also known as Mahault of Hainault, was instrumental in a trial that involved her husband's claim to the county of Flanders. These women, among others, demonstrate the significant role that women played in medieval trial by combat. Their involvement highlights the complexity and breadth of medieval society's engagement with this ancient legal practice. As we explore these historic trials, we gain a more nuanced understanding of the social dynamics and legal systems that defined medieval Europe. The role of women in these trials offers a compelling lens through which to view the intricacies of medieval justice. Beyond the role of women in medieval justice, another intriguing aspect is the part played by clerics. In some cases, priests or monks acted as champions, fighting on behalf of the accused or accuser in trials by combat. Historical accounts detail instances where clergy members stood in for laypeople, using their status and training to represent others in these physical trials. The Church's stance on this practice is notable. While it allowed clerics to participate in trials by combat, it emphasized that this role should not interfere with their primary duties. Clerical champions were expected to uphold the same standards of conduct and piety as they would in any other aspect of their lives, maintaining their holy vows while engaged in these legal battles. The involvement of clerical champions underscores the importance of honor and divine intervention in determining guilt or innocence. One notable example is the case of Godfrey de Harcourt versus Roger de Beaumont, two influential nobles who clashed over their political and territorial ambitions in medieval France. Preparations for this event were meticulous, with both nobles training rigorously to ensure they would be physically ready to prove their innocence and claim their rightful place. The day of the combat arrived, and under the watchful eyes of the king and his court, they engaged in a fierce battle that was seen as a reflection of divine will. The victor would not only be declared innocent, but also gain significant political advantage, solidifying their power and influence within the feudal system. This instance underscores how trial by combat played a pivotal role in medieval governance, serving as both a legal process and a tool for political maneuvering. As feudal conflicts continued to shape the landscape of medieval Europe, trial by combat remained a critical means through which nobles could assert their dominance and resolve their disputes. However, as the Middle Ages progressed and the influence of the Church grew stronger, the practice began to decline, eventually being replaced by more modern legal systems, such as trial by jury. This shift highlights how trial by combat was not just a means of settling disputes, but also deeply intertwined with the social and political dynamics of medieval feudalism. By exploring specific historical examples like the case of Godfrey de Harcourt versus Roger de Beaumont, we gain a deeper understanding of the practical applications and political implications of trial by combat in medieval governance.